Welcome to the My Opinion podcast, where two dynamic sisters dive deep into the world of women in entrepreneurship, sharing their own personal journeys, insights, and opinions.
From their wins to challenges, the highs and lows of their personal lives, and the hottest topics shaping our world, we are the fierce and fearless hosts that tackle it all.
Get ready for engaging conversations, inspiring stories, and thought-provoking discussions that celebrate the power and resilience of women.
Now, let's dive into an episode where we empower women entrepreneurs, one opinion at a time.
Welcome back to the My Opinion podcast. We have another really exciting episode today, and my amazing new co-host is back with me. Lily, welcome back to the show.
Hi guys, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yes, you are back, and it's been really exciting so far. We've shared both of our stories and talked about how to start, which is something I think most entrepreneurs get kind of frozen on, right?
Yeah.
How to start. Like, that was a huge thing for me. It was like getting that shove to start and that push to start. But I want to take it back today, Lily, a little bit into a question I get pretty often when people work with me on launching either their podcast, brand, different things like that. It's a question I hear a lot, like, where do I even start? Well, we address that. But then after that, I get, but how do I know what to do? Like, how do I know what I like? How do I know what to sell? How do I know? And what they're really asking, fill in the blank with all of those questions, what they're really asking is, how do I know what I'm passionate?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good and hard question to ask yourself.
It is. It's a really good and hard question. Exactly. Which is why when I was thinking back about our last episode, how to start, I'm like, hang on, let's rewind it and dive into a few of those things we kind of skimmed over, but just touched on, which was, finding your passion or finding what you like. But we're really going to talk about that today. And the other aspect of this that we're going to talk about is finding your passion, but also, or identifying your passion, but also identifying or finding your niche, which in my opinion, that's an evolution. What do you think? And then I want to define both of those and then we'll dive in. But what do you think about niche? I think that evolves.
Yeah, I mean, just like I've evolved what I'm selling, what I'm doing, repurposing, your niche is gonna evolve as well. So what people liked to see a couple months ago might be different from what they like to see now.
Yeah, I totally agree. So just so we have a clear definition on what we're talking about, because I think sometimes people mix passion with niche, and that's great, but we need to clearly identify, what each one is. So your passion is what ignites your soul. It gets you excited. It gets you out of bed in the morning. It's not always, your passion is not, you might really love podcasting like I do, but you might not like doing some of those granular things. And we're going to get into more of that, right? So, but your niche is a little bit different. Some people say that you don't need a niche. We're gonna go back and tell our opinion on that as well. I do think so. Spoiler alert. But your niche is like the specific area within your industry where you can excel and meet the needs of your target audience. So for me, I don't know that, like, my audience has evolved through time, and that's okay. But I think it becomes a challenge is when you don't know who your audience is at all. That's really knowing your niche. So marrying those two together is really, really important. So I want to ask you, in your opinion, Lily, do you think that having like a niche and knowing who exactly your audience is, do you think that is important for you? Or are you just kind of, like, what's been your journey with that?
So as I'm evolving, I think it's important. It wasn't so much before because I was just getting into it. I was just trying to see what I could sell, who I could sell it to. Well, I actually really didn't care about the who. It was I selling items. But now I like, specific things, and I really want to focus on what I like selling versus I still want people to buy the items, obviously, but I want to be a little bit more passionate about the things I'm selling. So I have started to try to figure out exactly what makes me more happy and that sells the best as well. Um, because if you're just, I mean, I guess there's a lot of generalized people selling things, but I think the people that do the best are the ones that find something they like as well as other people have a demand for it.
Very well said. I agree completely. So it's interesting because as you're evolving in your business, you're leaning more into your niche and target audience, but that's also aligning with your passion and what you like,
Yeah.
which is the goal. And that's what we're going to talk about
Yes.
today. Like, how do you do that? For me, I was very much like you. I was like, I just want to make a sale. I just want to work with people who want to do events. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, all of my businesses, I felt like that. And once you start to get those sales and build your business or businesses, it changes, it evolves, and you
Mhm.
start to realize I'm not really passionate about doing this, or I'm not really passionate about that, but I am passionate about this. So, an example for me is, when I first went out on my own doing events, completely out on my own doing events, I was like, I'm going to just work with whoever wants to work with me.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's necessarily a bad strategy because you learn what you like and you
We
don't.
have to you have to get in there somewhere too.
I think so,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And I learned very quickly that I didn't want to do, and I kind of shared this before, right? Like, I didn't want to do weddings. That wasn't my thing. I wasn't passionate
Mhm.
about it. I mean, I got married at the courthouse. It's not really my vibe, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and so I knew that was like what I didn't want to do. And I think that's an important message as well in this episode is, sometimes you learn what you're passionate about and what you really want to focus on and how you want to niche down into a specific audience by
Mhm.
what you don't like.
Yeah.
Like, what are some aspects of your business that you do not like doing? Like, for me, it's like certain types of events. Like, I'm
Mhm.
not into like anything that's too um wedding or personal or anything like that, but I do really enjoy corporate and nonprofit. And I never would have known that had I not done some weddings, had I not
Yeah.
come from the wedding
Mhm.
industry, things like that, right? So I know I love nonprofit because I love to give back. And I also
Mhm.
really love corporate because they're great clients and it's less um I can be more creative, which people are surprised by, but you can be because they're more open to it because it's
Yeah.
not a 1 day shot, right? It's usually you're
Yeah.
doing lots of
Mhm.
events or one, annually for them. So that's how I learned that. But I'd be curious to hear about yours too. Like, how did you kind of follow your path?
So for me, it's more of like what type, like where I want to sell the items and how I want to get them out there. I quickly learned I didn't want to use, Facebook Marketplace. No. Or, like eBay. A lot of these apps are just challenging to navigate or just have a lot of headache that is not worth your time. I know a lot of people that do great on all the platforms that I don't like, and I know a lot of people that are terrible on the platforms I love. So I feel like for me, that was the main thing, as well as just finding things that we've talked about this before, but items that were flipping for not very much. So I learned quickly, like, okay, well, I'm not going to pick up those anymore. That's just a waste of my time, waste of space, energy. But mainly it was finding out which apps I wanted to sell on, where I wanted to sell, and how I wanted to, spend my time, limited time,
Mhm.
with those different platforms.
That's interesting that you say it was a platform choice too. And I think that's, me being, the event kind of nerd and like knowing different,
Hmm.
platforms and apps and things. I think that's really important too. And it's like, yourself, and that's a part of it as well. Knowing yourself
Hmm.
is so important in the passion side of it because if you're not passionate about getting on a certain platform, like some people don't like to do Instagram lives or do TikTok lives or
Hmm.
create videos, fill in the blank, right? Like, so you need to find a way to build your business that you're comfortable with. And I do recommend pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. But if you're not passionate about going live on TikTok, every week
Yeah.
or whatever platform, right? That's not probably going to work for you because it's really difficult to sustain passion that doesn't come from within.
Yeah. And it's going to kill your energy for your passion really fast and you're going to lose steam.
Yeah, and that's happened to all of us, right? Like, you've got
Mhm.
to stay in the passion, but then that's why having a niche is really important. So I
Mhm.
really think it's interesting that you mentioned that now as you're growing and moving forward in your business, that your niche has become more important, because I know you mentioned it on earlier episodes too, that like you really wanted to get into the vintage reselling, a
Mhm.
more high end, and that evolved for you. But in the beginning, it was, you said that today too. It was
Yeah.
about getting the sale. Come on, it's
Yeah.
about getting the sale, right? So I kind of want to answer some of these like questions that have come about while going through our tips and our advice. But, you know, we did kind of bring this up before. And so when I've gotten
Mhm.
these questions from potential clients and even people I have worked with, where do I start? Okay, go back to the last episode. We
Yeah.
covered that. But how do I find what I'm passionate about? How do I figure out what I want to sell? How do I, all of the things that I mentioned earlier? Well, my advice, and I've brought this up before, is to make a list. Make a list of the things you love, make a list of the things you hate. And that will give
Mhm.
you a pretty good um recap and insight. And sometimes that's stumped, and I want to add this part to it, that stumped some of the people that I've worked with. They're like, I don't even know where to start. And I'm like, just start writing. Just start writing
Yeah.
down what you love doing every single day. And it can be as simple as like, I love reality TV. Or like I like it can be that simple.
Mhm. Yeah.
So what do you think about that? Like I think it stumped some people though that have worked with
Yeah.
me. And so I've had to kind of coach them through it, which is something that I do when launching a podcast, because they're like, I want to do a podcast, but I don't know what I want to talk about. It's the same thing as becoming an entrepreneur. It's the same thing as building a brand. You have to know what you're passionate about. And so if you are sitting there and saying, I don't know, I'm not passionate about anything. I've literally heard this before. It's so not true. Like we're living,
No.
breathing beings that are doing things every day. What are some tips that you can kind of give in that step one?
So I think there's a couple things that I did. I started listening to myself and what I would talk about with people. I was talking a lot about fashion, aside when you're gossiping with your friends or whatever, talking
Yeah.
about mom life. And, we would talk a lot about fashion or what we saw on social media, things like that. So then I also started thinking, well, who do I follow on social media? And I realized I was following fashion designers, people like the Studio McGee, she does like her Target line, all that. And so then I looked farther into what I liked about those things, and I thought, well, I could do this, but like on a budget. And so I started kind of from there, and I started following people. I realized I was already following people that were doing this, but I started following more people that were doing thrifting and upcycling. I was following a lot of people that sewed their own clothing. So I would just say, first look at who you follow on social media. If you're
Hmm.
not on social media, then what are you talking about with your friends, your family? What do you watch on TV? If you like the fashion shows, so yeah, I just say start there too. If you really don't know, you have something you're passionate about because you're watching it every day, you're talking about it every day, you're doing something that involves it, you just might not realize it.
I am so into this advice that you're giving. Yeah, I think that's really great. Yeah, and I know you've always been into the home makeover shows and
Yeah.
like the fashion, you know what I mean? The Project Runway, all of that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Like we both have been huge fans of that for sure, but you definitely have been a bigger fan in like the creative side of it for sure. For me, I was always like, how are they going to build this business? How do
I
they
was gonna
make
say sometimes some people are just interested in that stuff because they're like, I have no idea how you I would ever do that. And some people are really interested because they're like, oh my gosh, I could do that.
Mhm.
Or I could do it better. I know a lot of people have thought that when they're watching these shows.
I love that. Don't you think that's kind of a light bulb moment too when you're watching something or listening to something or talking to someone
Mhm.
and you say to yourself, I could do that or I could do that better. I feel like that's a passion moment.
Yeah, definitely.
For me, it's been a passion moment for sure. I mean, that's what drove me to start doing events on my own, because not that there was anything wrong with the places I've worked or the people I've worked with, but I was like, I can do this. I got this. I can do this. And when I felt that kind of like fire in me, I was like, okay, like this is, and it feels different when it's your own. It's
Yeah.
really empowering, don't you think?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of self-doubt though that people will probably be like, "Well, I just don't have the confidence to do it." And trust me, I never did either. but
What
you
changed
learn
for
every
you?
day.
Yeah, I
I
mean, I think
just
that's a part of passion too, because you might feel lit up about it, but then the next day you've got your, your 9 to 5, which is really like a 8 to 7 these days, right?
yeah.
And you're like, that's a secure check. Like, why am I going to go take this leap? I just felt the fire yesterday, but then you'll talk about it again. You'll feel the fire again. So, what gave you the confidence to follow the fire and follow the passion?
For me, it was really just not wanting to work where I was working. I was miserable, and I
But
guess
so
I
many
just
people
gained confidence.
are. So many people are,
Mhm.
right? They're miserable. And
Yeah.
so it can be challenging to take that leap. So what means you finally follow like that fire?
Well, I got pregnant and I realized there was no way I wanted to work out of the home.
Yeah.
I just did not feel comfortable putting my child with somebody else, which I don't blame anybody else that does. It was just my personal opinion.
Yeah.
And so I think that's obviously not going to be everybody's come to Jesus moment or whatever, but
Mhm.
I think a lot of people, if they do just, give themselves a little bit of confidence, a little bit of grace, they can see that they can do it. They have to believe that they can do it. I mean, every day is a challenge for me. You own your own business, you work for yourself, whatever you want to call it. It's not going to be easy.
Mhm.
It's not going to be easy. Staying at your miserable job probably would be easier.
Mhm.
So you have to really want to work for it and make it happen.
Which is what we're helping you do by talking about this, right?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I think there is a turning point though for everybody, which we've already touched on in both of our stories in the first
Hmm.
episode and second episode of this season. But I think that story, I think to your point, it looks different for everybody. And that's why identifying your passions, because there's not going to be just one, but identifying your
Hmm.
passions, like that's really the first step. And some people have even told me too, when I give them that advice, which your advice was amazing. um Listen to what you're talking about, listen to, listen listen to what you're hearing on podcasts. If you're
Yeah.
listening to this podcast, you probably want to start a business. If you're watching or listening to us, you probably want to start a business. Just saying, because this is
Yeah.
not going to be interesting to you if you're if you're not wanting to do that.
Mhm.
But what you're watching, everything we just talked about too, and that was those were turning points for me as well. As you know, COVID was a turning point for me, and you
Yeah.
getting pregnant was your turning point. And I think being miserable in your job and being really unhappy, that's a turning point. We just don't always listen to it.
Yeah. I think people constantly, they'll just say, okay, what's next? Let me this hard hit the pavement and look for another job, look for another job, look for another job. Meanwhile, in the back of their head, they're very curious about, this idea they have or this passion they have, and they're too scared, all these obstacles they have to face to even think about doing that as a real career, job, business. So it's just about getting past those, or maybe just, taking baby steps every day to start those things to get you to your passion while you're still working. I know a lot of people in the upcycled thrifting community that they do have 9 to 5s, and they do this on the side. And I know a couple girls that have, transitioned fully to owning their own business from their 9 to 5, and they slowly just start taking it back, and then they've gained the confidence to fully own their own business.
It's
So,
kind of like taking off the training wheels is what
yeah.
it reminds me of, right? Like when learning to ride a bike and you've got training wheels, like I feel like it's our safety. And like we may be in a job where we have some passion, like I was definitely passionate about what I was
Mhm.
doing, but I wanted it to be my own. I wanted full autonomy over what I was doing. And I realized that's a part of passion too, right? Is like,
Mhm.
how do you want to work? And who do you want to work for? That's a passion as well. And if you want to work for yourself, it's really hard because your boss can be really awesome and really tough sometimes if you
Yeah.
work for yourself, because you're hard on yourself, right? But
Mhm.
I think that is a great one right there to talk about, is taking the training wheels off. And like when you take training wheels off, if you think about it, when you learn to ride a bike and oh my gosh, like you got your like training wheels loosened, they didn't just come off right away. Or if you were in my family. Yeah, they did. When we lived in the country, we got thrown down a hill, but that's a whole other story, which entrepreneurship can feel like that too. Um, but typically they get loosened, you get used to it. And then once you feel
Mhm.
comfortable, you might go down that hill and take that final leap to go out on your own. So I think that's something to think about. But exploring your passion and writing your list, and as corny as it might sound, like these are all really important things, and they're things that I did too. um you kind of already touched on this, Lily, but another thing that is important to do is look at your interests, which we talked
Mhm.
about. What are you talking about? What are you watching? But what are you doing on a day-to-day basis? Like, some people will again come to me and be like, I don't know what I want to do though. Like, what do I do?
Mhm.
And I'll know this person and I'm like, they literally go to the gym 7 days a week. Why are they not side hustling with,
Mhm.
something, a supplement, or, their own workout video on YouTube? It's totally free to make.
And a
So
lot of people are doing that.
a lot of people are doing that. But that's something I want to talk about too when we get to niche. So
Mhm.
don't let me forget. Is I will hear that a lot as well. It's like, oh, there's a lot of people in this space. Kind of tease that. We're going to talk about that. But the reality is, but you're not doing that.
Yeah.
And you are for some people and you're not for other people. And that's okay. That's a good thing because there's
Yeah.
space for everybody. And I think sometimes it can be intimidating, especially doing something like podcasting. And when I work with clients on that, they're like, oh, well, there's a zillion podcasts out there now. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not creating it. You're not the one doing it.
Yeah.
So what do you bring to the table that's unique? So I think, just like you said, look at what you're saying, look at what you're talking about, look at what you're watching, but also what you genuinely enjoy doing on a daily
Mhm.
basis. I genuinely enjoy talking a lot, as you know. So this was kind of a really good fit for me. So
Yeah.
what do you enjoy doing? Like, that's a huge thing. Um, okay, so this is the part where you start to kind of turn it into problem solving, and
Mhm.
that creates a business, right? So it's identifying a pain point. You know, for a lot of us out there, that can be kind of the intimidating step, I think. When you're going through like the passion to purpose cycle, and like finding your niche and going through this flow.
Mhm.
But when you're identifying problems, like my website, Find a Co-host, I had a problem. Now you can go on there and find a co-host for your podcast. I had a problem myself. I wanted to fix it. And I think sometimes we overanalyze or overthink a little bit about what the problem is. But if you literally are having a problem with something, you're like, I should create something to fix that. Or I should. Have you
Mhm.
ever had those moments, or did that kind of lead you down your path, like where you were like, I should do this because I had this problem? That was a big journey for me.
I mean, mine was I was trying to find affordable shoes, affordable clothes because I really like to shop and I couldn't really sustain it anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
I had a really bad shoe problem and then I would go to Goodwill and look around and I'd be like, I just bought those shoes for 100 whatever I bought them for and they're selling them for 8. I'm like, they're not my size, but like I could sell those.
Mhm.
And so then I started to think like, well, could I actually do that? And I could. So a pain point for me was, I just realized I can't afford to buy, 20 pairs of shoes in a month. So I started to find ways I could. And I think that's how a lot of people get started with what I'm doing is they're shopping for themselves and they realize, wow, I'm finding all these clothes. They're not my size, but like they're good prices. So what do I do with that?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, yeah, you do not have a shoe problem in the past. No, we have a shoe problem. Let's
Yes.
just admit it. It's just a
Yes.
reality. We have a shoe problem in this whole family. Let's be
Yeah.
real. I have yet to meet a woman in our immediate family that does not obsess over shoes.
Yes.
So it's neither here nor there.
I
But
know.
I think there's a really great point in that though, because you had a personal problem, and the way that you solved it for yourself, you wanted to bring to others. And that's really the message here in this point. Like, how do you take that passion? How do you take something you love, which is shoes for us? We love shoes. And turn it into something like now you've
Mhm.
got an entire thrifting business, but in the beginning there were different reasons why you were doing it and you were solving personal problems. And that's really where you find that
Mhm.
passion meets purpose,
Yeah.
because you're able to fulfill what other people need. Because you can't, here's the thing that I think people forget to tell me your opinion on this, but I think people forget that, like, if you're having that problem, there's probably millions of other people out there having that problem too.
Yeah, and I see a lot of people, I'm in our neighborhood Facebook pages, all that. I see them constantly saying like, "Oh, is anybody giving away XYZ sizes and kids clothes?" And I'm just like, "Why don't you just go thrift?" Or, there's so much clothing out there that needs to be taken from these landfills. It's like insane. And I wish I would have known this. I mean, I guess I did know it. I didn't know to the extent. But I wish I would have just been thrifting my whole life. I would have felt a lot better too about the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you're so, and that's the really cool part about what you do is you're not just solving. And this is when I start to feel really fulfilled, which will be
Mhm,
another episode. Is like, what fulfills you? That's kind of further down the pike, but
mhm,
it's identifying a problem, solving it, but then starting to see other ways that it solves other problems. Like
mhm.
with what you do, you're helping the ecosystem, the environment, and creating sustainability, right? Because we're
Yeah.
reusing clothes that, and you're making a profit off of the work that you're doing, which is
Mhm,
really huge. For me, I had to have that kind of dual or triple um kind of feeling as well for me, because
mhm.
I think that's why I decided when I started doing events on my own, I was like, weddings are just a no go for me because people are going to think I'm like not into love. Like, I'm definitely into love, but that's not, I
Mhm,
didn't feel fulfilled. It was somebody writing a big check for one
mhm.
day of their life. It just wasn't the problem I wanted to solve. I really enjoy doing nonprofit because I'm solving multiple problems. I'm helping them
Yeah.
raise money. I'm creating a beautiful event for them. I am giving back to a cause that because I never work with a client where I do not believe in the cause. That's another thing,
Mhm.
right? So corporate is the same thing for me too. I'm helping build a business because I own my own businesses. So that was really, that fed my soul as well. And I think that's something that you really need to think about when you're solving a problem too. Like, do you really care about the cause? And I see that in you, Lily, where you're passionate about fashion, you're passionate about, buying clothing that's, going to be reused. It's
Mhm.
sustainable, it's eco-friendly. That's huge for the environment. And I think it's something people need to really think about, you guys all listening or watching need to think about when you're uncovering your passion and what problems you want to solve. Anything
Yes.
else you want to add? So I think we kind of talked about this already, but bringing the two together, like bringing your passion together and then bringing your skills together too, because not everybody is like you, Lily, and can like roll up their sleeves. Because I went to the bins with her while I was out there, guys, and it's like that is a whole whoa. I was really blown away, and I had a whole, not that I didn't respect what you were doing, and I know you know that. I'm like so proud of you, but I had a whole new appreciation going through and like really searching through for these
Mhm.
items. And if you guys have never done this, you should go do it if you're into fashion, because it's pretty interesting what you can find. Like, I was blown away. You're like looking through it and you're like, nope, nope, yes, yes. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna step away. Like, she's really got it down. But that's a skill. Like, being able to identify the brands, being able to go through and do that and understand what will sell, what won't. Like, that's a skill. Can you learn it? Like you said, yes, you absolutely can.
Yeah.
But that's a skill. So it's about marrying the two together, right? Passion and skill to solve a problem. That's really the whole, I guess if you were to make this kind of like a mathematical equation, that's what you would do. Like, skill plus passion plus, problem equals
Mhm.
business. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's the best balance. If you can, not every, passion that's going to be able to coexist with. Um, but I think that's the best solution if you can, because going forward, I mean, that's going to be the most sustainable form of a business if you can connect all those.
I agree. It's like the math, like I said, the mathematical equation just kind of clicked with me as we were talking. I'm like, hang on, that's like what works. That's what makes a
Mhm.
business. Your passion, your skills, solving a problem equals business. So there you go. We can all go
Yeah.
home. No, we got a few more points. Anyway, so no, I think that's really, really important. I want to go back just for a second though to those of you who are like, well, Maya's talking and Maya really loves to talk. Duh. So podcasting makes sense. Doing events makes sense. I'm extremely detail oriented. Like I knew those were my strengths always. So this always made sense for me. I like creating new things. I feel very accomplished by doing that. And I like solving problems. So all the things that I've ventured in and done that aligns for
Mhm.
you, you know, with what you're doing. You like to talk like me too. So podcasting makes sense. That's why I was
Yeah.
like, well, it's got to do this show with me. But you you're very creative, you love fashion, everything you mentioned earlier. But some people don't sometimes have lost passion for life. They've lost their passion or have lost kind of the road to passion. So my advice is usually then like what you were talking about earlier, yes, think about what you talk about. But some people have kind of, I like to call it corporate dying, when you kind of die in your job or you kind of shut down your interest because you're just trying to make it. And at that point, I think it's really important. Like if you literally can't write anything down, you need to go out and just do
Try
things like in your
things.
free time,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Right? What are
Mhm.
some things that you would recommend trying?
Trying. I guess it depends on if you're a creative person,
Yeah.
uh, creative, logical, hands-on, what type of person you are.
Introvert,
Um,
extrovert, it depends, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because
hmm
I'm not gonna tell an introvert to go, go join a support group where you have to share your entire
Right.
background in life,
Or go to a weekly networking
Yeah.
event. Like that's, I
Yeah.
mean, although I think that can be very helpful, but if you're not sure if you're introverted or extroverted, go to a networking event. Hot tip, go to a networking event and see if you enjoy it. You'll figure out really fast if you're introverted or extroverted, right? Like that's what I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
I mean, there's things that, I would tell myself if I could go back, I would have been like, go to a crafts fair, see if any of that interests you. We have a lot of thrift marts here. Like Sundays, they'll do like big tent thrift marts and okay, go to those, see what people are selling there. Like you and we went to the air show and they had like thrift booths set up there. And
I know. That was so cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
I know, but I was telling you, I'm like, I can't believe there's some of the stuff they're trying to sell or like what they were trying to sell it for. So I mean, I could have done things like that in the past and been like, well, I could do that.
Yeah.
Um,
But you don't think that way anymore because you are doing it, but you would have
yeah,
thought that. And it was interesting too. I love that you brought up the air show because when we were at the air show, you were completely attracted to that. You were like, let's go
yeah,
over here. Like you were attracted to it. So had you not started your business yet, it would have been like, Lily, you need to be doing this.
yeah,
So listen to the people that you love and trust. Those are two key things, that love
hmm,
you, trust you, vice, both ways, right?
hmm,
Because they'll be able to identify that too. Had you not already started your business and already been selling and doing this already, I would have been like, Lily, doink, 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 knock, knock, knock. This is what you should be doing because
yeah,
we're at an air show and you're attracted to the vintage items. I mean, come on, that was so cool. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, so that you can do that. I would also there's tons of community events in your area. Like no matter where you live, no matter where you are, there's community events. Are they going to be 100% what you want? Maybe not,
Right.
but branching out and going to them, you could figure out you don't like them, or you could meet people that do things that you're like, wow, I've never thought about that, or that sounds interesting. Um, just random things like the other day I went on a polar plunge. So we went into the ocean at sunset and I had never done that and it was really fun, really invigorating. I met people I'd never met before. Um so just trying crazy random new things can help you sometimes find out what you're passionate about.
I'm so jealous you did that, by the way. What was your biggest takeaway from that? Just as a, not even a sidebar, but just like a little takeaway. Cause I have always wanted to do like a polar
Mhm.
plunge, but I'm in 100-degree weather in Atlanta, Georgia. So that opportunity does not arise all the time. So
My
what,
takeaway is that my body is stronger than I thought it was, because my friend that took me, she's like, don't be discouraged if you can only stand in for like a couple minutes, because like the goal was 20 minutes. And I did the whole 20 minutes. And she was like, wow, like, I can't believe you've never done this before. So my takeaway is my body's stronger than I thought.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's a great takeaway. And I think that's a really good message too, because literally the next thing I have on here to talk about is called testing the waters. How weird is that? That's so weird. Okay, I kind of love this. I kind of love this journey for you. So that's amazing. Like that's really cool that you, and I think that if you don't take anything else away from this episode, hopefully this is one of your takeaways, hopefully, that message that you just gave, Lily. Like you walked away and you're like, my body is stronger than I thought. Like I can probably do more with my body than I thought, right? Things like
Hmm.
that. And I think that's really powerful coming from someone who has birthed a literal child, like is a mother,
Hmm.
because you're still open to like what else can I do? What are some
Hmm.
interests, like pushing yourself. And I think, that's opening yourself up to, because if the polar plunge might not be something you want to like run yourself or do or like
Yeah.
create a group, but I do think it shows us and proves to us that we can do a whole lot more than we realize when we go out and try
Hmm.
these different things.
Yeah.
And I heard it's really good for your health, so I'm really jealous that you did
Yep.
that.
Well, people do ice baths, so it's basically the same thing.
Right. Yeah, and it's supposed to be really good for you. So maybe that's going to be my polar plunge. Wait till you see a picture of me in the bathtub with a bunch of ice. Okay, so I think, I mean, again, you literally just rolled right into this, which is perfect. Um, testing the waters. Literally, Lily did test the waters. She was
Hmm.
in a polar plunge. I love it. But no, I think that's when, because people will often, and you guys are probably curious if you haven't started a business and you want to know, are like, okay, that's great. Like, I'm super passionate about running, but now what? What do I do
Hmm.
next? Right. Like I've identified it. I run every day at 5 a.m., for an hour and a half. That's definitely not me, but good for you. Right. That's amazing. What's next? Well,
Hmm.
the reason this part of it is called testing the waters is because you're probably not going to get it right the first time out of the gate. Right.
Yeah.
Like if you got like if you're going to do like a live every morning or 3 times a week or whatever it is, and you're going to start, or you're going to start a running team, like a virtual, or however you're going to do that, it's not going to be perfect right away. It's not going to
Yeah.
be, and I think that's more than finding your passion and finding things that you're passionate about. I think this is where a lot of people get stuck. What's your opinion on this?
Yeah, I think it also depends on if you're trying to do something locally versus, a wider range. Like mine is not just local, obviously. I know people that do just sell locally. I don't, I mean, I feel like you have to have a pretty big following locally for that.
Mhm.
But something like a running group, you run every morning, that would be something you'd have to find if there was a niche for it locally. If you have 500 people locally that want to do that, then yeah. But those are going to be things you're going to have to figure out too. Is this just going to be something small, or am I wanting to like be as big as I can be with it?
Yeah, great point. Yeah, that's why it's called testing the waters. And this is really a crucial time in your business. And that's why you said it really well earlier, Lily, that, you know, you don't have to quit your job, right
Yeah.
away, but starting to learn these passions because, you know, I'm using running for an example, probably because I miss it. But, you could be someone that creates this whole program online that teaches you how to start from being super out of shape like I am to running, right? Like that could be a
Mhm.
whole thing. And that's an evolution. That's how you evolve your passion into something a little more profitable. Because to your point, Lily, like when you keep it local, only certain businesses are really sustainable with it being local. And
Yeah.
it's a small percentage. It's not doable, but it's not, I mean, we're online now. We're so plugged in. I think
Yeah.
having, different offerings is really important. But
Mhm.
when you're testing the waters, it's also going to really help you identify your niche, which is really like a lot of people talk about this all the time. Niche, 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 niche. Um, or niche, like some people say, which is fine. But
Niche.
niche or niche, tomato, tomato. But like, I've talked about this so many times over the years on the podcast. And I think the really important thing to remember is that all that is a fancy word for who are you talking to? Who are you
Mhm.
talking to? Who are you speaking to? For me, my event business, I am speaking to people who want to do wonderful events, who either give back to a nonprofit community or I work with corporations that I believe in their messaging and want to help them grow, whatever
Mhm.
their objective is. My other businesses, obviously this podcast, we're talking to women who want to be entrepreneurs or already entrepreneurs and giving you guys feedback, right? So it's identifying your audience. I have other podcasts as well. It's identifying that. I,
Mhm.
and a lot of people say the riches are in the niches. I have mixed feelings on that. What's your opinion on that quote? I want to hear what you have to say because I have mixed feelings on that one.
Um, I don't think that's necessarily true because I think now that social media and we are so plugged in, I watch a lot of people that I don't know what the heck they're doing. I'm not going to buy your item, but I'll watch it, you know? So I think if you can reach who you're trying to reach and you're reaching more, then great. That's just going to benefit you in the long run. People might be interested, but not interested in doing what you're doing or interested in what you're selling necessarily, but they are there to, they'll like your Instagram or whatever. And I think it's fine. I don't think you necessarily have to just have one audience that's rooting for you. I think a lot of people they're like, I'm so hard oh god, I've seen this before. Like, I'm so hardcore vintage. Like, I don't even want to interact with other resellers who don't do what I'm doing or, and I don't get that at all. It's like we're all basically doing the same thing. Why would we not all uplift each other? So I don't necessarily think that that's a true statement.
I agree with you. Shocker. I agree with you for the most part, actually, but I think so too because I think the pandemic. I talk about this all the time. Gosh, if I never see the pandemic or like COVID ever again, I say it all the time. But the pandemic did shift this for us, right? Because a lot of people got on social media and just started creating content, and because of different
Mhm.
algorithms, became popular. And maybe there wasn't a
Yeah.
specific niche for them. Now, do I think when you're doing a podcast like this, we know who we're talking to, right?
Yeah.
We know we're
Mhm.
talking to women. Guys, if you're watching, great. Love it.
Well,
Fabulous.
I mean, I've had people, my hairdresser, they were like, "That's not me. I'm not a woman in business, but I would listen to that because I like thrifting." So, I mean, there's people that might not be exactly in this box, but might be interested.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, I mean, like that's the whole point of the riches that are in the niches, I think is something that is kind of moving. It's moving away. The ship is kind of
mhm,
left the harbor.
mhm,
Because do I think that you should start with a honed in message and identify who you're selling to in the beginning? Yeah.
yeah,
Right? I think so.
mhm,
But is it okay to expand beyond that? Absolutely. I mean, my other show about sibling loss is really specific. It's about
yeah,
siblings who've lost siblings, right? So that grew just because it is niche. But I realized over the past 2 years of doing that show, the reason it grew is because, yes, it was niche, but also when people came to it, the message was very clear what I'm talking about because not only siblings listen to it, parents, grandparents, people who want to understand loss,
mhm,
they started listening to it. To your point, exactly what
yeah,
you're talking about. So it's about really identifying who that person is that you're talking to, but then also making your product, your service, whatever it is that you're doing available to others so it's not that's what I think the problem. This is my opinion on this. That's what I think the
mhm,
problem with the riches or in the niches statement was for a really long time because people would be like, "Oh, they get so hyper focused that they would
mhm,
not even do it," right? Or be like, "I don't know who my audience is." Like that the key thing there is it evolves. It's not going to stay the same. So
yeah,
when you get so obsessed with like, okay, my audience, like this is a no-no to me. My audience is women from 25 to 30. They like, vintage clothing or they like, whatever we're selling, right? Or they like podcasting, so I'm going to sell a mic to them, or they like fill in the blank, whatever it is.
Mhm.
You're blocking out women younger than 25, women that are,
Mhm.
you're kind of blocking that. So while I do think it's important to identify who you would like to sell to, that's knowing your niche. You don't want to create something where it would preclude people who fall into the same kind of bracket of things, whether
Mhm.
it's interest, age, gender, anything, from approaching that product,
Yeah.
service, whatever it is. And that's something I really learned with Find a Co-host, because I thought I'd be working with a lot of women to match
Mhm.
them. But fun fact, it's majority men that I'm working with.
Wow.
So I actually had to evolve it a little more because the website
Mhm.
was a little feminine. So I had to evolve it. So I I kind of was blocking out. I have more male customers on there than female. So I had to evolve,
Yeah.
because your audience will also tell you this too, I think.
Yeah.
Because if you're not if you're not making sales, you're not doing anything, there's a couple of things that could be going wrong, which is another episode entirely, which we'll do. How do you right the ship, or how do you overcome those things? Which I think that's a really good topic that we should cover. But I think when you get too specific about who you're talking to, podcasting has really taught me a lot about that, because I was like, oh, my show is going to be for, this is like, back when I was first starting, my show is going to be for women, and this, there's age brackets for everything.
Yeah.
And I was really focused on that. And then I started having these incredible women on in leadership, and, we're going to bring some women on in entrepreneurship. I did both. And I watched the age groups, because you can see your, you know,
Mhm.
stats and everything. And they were all over the place. Like, I have women that are, you know, coming out of high school listening to this, all the way up until 60s, 70s. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, it's time to rethink. Like, you're not just talking to this one type of woman, you're talking to a broader audience. So do I think the riches are in the niches? Yes and no. I agree
Yeah.
with you, because I think you can't be a generalist. It doesn't work. You're not Joe
Yeah.
Rogan. Sorry. It just doesn't work. Um, but he's really the only podcaster that can kind of pull that off. And same
Mhm.
thing with, like, when celebrities start building different brands. Think about where they started. They all started with their passion
Mhm.
in one lane. So that's why I kind of teeter on both sides of that quote and understanding that. But I do think it's a really good exercise to sit down and think about who you're selling to, or who you're helping with your service or with your items. Like, do you do that when you're like curating your shop and when you're curating your business, or do you think about that person, or how does it work for you with your niche? Because I think you described it really well, Lily. Like,
Mhm. For me, it's mainly like what's in fashion, what do people want to see? Not necessarily. It's a little bit more general, just because fashion is more general now. There's so many different terms and conditions of fashion now that everybody has their own style. So it kind of is just like, is this in style? No, but like some people are wearing it. Okay, that might not be worth it unless it's a very, an amazing brand, or, condition, year, things like that. So I think with me it's a little bit more general, just because I don't have like people I personally style other than, like, my family right
I was
now.
gonna say, you definitely style me, so yes, but so Lily can do that if you would like. But yes, I was like, you definitely do it for me. Are you kidding? When we were literally together shopping, you were like, "Yep, that's for you." I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah, so for me it's just a little bit more of a general, like, um is this in fashion? Can I make what I generally try to make within my profit margins? If it's a no, then no. Obviously, I don't get it. Even if it's a good brand, I think people sometimes get hung up on, well, it's this brand. It's like, it doesn't matter. If it's not going to sell, it's not going to sell. It's A brand is not going to sell itself unless it's, you know, these certain things that
yeah,
have to do with what everybody's wearing. And
Following trends. Yeah,
Yeah.
which is
Hmm.
really important in business, regardless of what you're doing, is following trends and identifying, um, you know, what is working, what is not working. And that's something that you've been able to do, which I think is really, really cool. And something that I've had to focus on too, like what's working, what's not working, who's
Hmm.
listening, who's not listening, who's buying, who's not buying. Because that's something I want to talk about too before we kind of close this out is we may think that it's a problem, but this is called, if you guys don't know this yet, it's called product market fit, right? So when you're starting something out, you may think it's a problem because it was a problem for you.
Hmm.
And so it's going to check all the marks, right? You're passionate about it, check. You are interested in it, check. And then it's a problem that you want to solve, check. So you've done all of that. You've now solved the problem. But product market fit is when you put it out in the market. And that can be to, you can test it, just throwing it out on social media. You can
Hmm.
test it with 10 people, message them, see. Because for me, like, find a co-host is really good for this example because this was such a problem for me, finding the right co-host. And it's such a problem for a lot of other people.
Hmm.
That's why I went on like Reddit and all those different sites and I was Googling it. I'm like, do people look for this? Like, that's
Hmm.
a part of the research phase. And it was a thing. But now we're in the phase of like honing in like what works. Does our cost make sense? Which you and I have talked about a lot in our businesses, like cost, and does that fit the market and the demand?
Hmm.
And is this really something that people want as a service? Well, it turns out yes, but there's things I've had to evolve with it. Um, just because you think it's a problem isn't always, a major problem, right? And so you have to kind of shine a light on it. And I think that's really important to do as well. Um, because, and then sometimes people don't know that there's a solution out there. So that's a whole other thing. That's like a marketing episode to talk about. But I think the main message, though, what we're trying to say, though, about like, I wish someone had told me this a long time ago about my audience because it was so ingrained in me for like 6, 7 years. Like, riches are in the niches. What's your niche? What's your niche? What's your niche? And I like felt so pressured. And I absolutely enjoyed doing, the podcast on leadership. And there's so many great episodes
Hmm.
still. If you guys want to go back and listen to them, they're fabulous. But for me, I found myself interviewing entrepreneurs a lot more later into, the 125 episodes I did on the relaunch. Well, there's a reason for that because
Yeah.
I had gone out on my own and started my own business. So I was just much more passionate about
Yeah.
that. So you're going to evolve and change. And then my audience was starting to evolve and change into more entrepreneurship than leadership, even though leadership goes hand in hand with entrepreneurship. So I think
Hmm.
you have to listen to that, right, as you evolve.
Yeah.
And you've evolved too, Lily, right? So,
Hmm.
like, how have you listened to that as you evolve? I mean, obviously, the market evolves, fashion changes every day. So, that naturally will continue to have
Yeah.
you evolve. But how do you see yourself evolving through kind of your audience and your
Hmm.
niche? Because you do have a niche, like you're doing vintage clothing, you're reselling, you're doing all
Hmm.
that, but it's also an evolution. So for you, what does that look like?
For me, it's, I need to look at right now, I need to look at my stock and see what's not selling. And I kind of need to stay away from those items that aren't selling, especially ones that I've had for a long time or that aren't in amazing condition. Because you can sell things that are not perfect, especially vintage. People still have a desire for that. So, my next evolution is I need to go through and see exactly what's selling, what works, what doesn't. Um, I need to redesign my space for selling. Um, I don't have a lot of space for that, so I need to figure out a solution. That's going to be my main evolution is finding a storage solution and
That's a good problem to have, though.
yeah.
Yeah. I think, that's a really good problem to have, like I said.
Hmm.
And that has been one of my problems that I've run into too, doing a totally different business. Like as I've grown my event business, I have all this event stuff. I have tables, I have linens, I have
Yeah.
like, even though I like to support my local vendors and use them, like I had to have some of this stuff. And that's kind of the evolution of business. But
especially if you're in a physical job that's draining.
How would you tell someone to keep, like you said, if you have a
Um,
physical job,
yeah, it can be hard.
it can be really
I
hard.
would, maybe not every day, but maybe every week find little bits of time to either find inspiration for that passion, find a little bit of energy to do what you like with that passion. Um, and then, just keep that going until you really can build up momentum to give full exertion into it. I mean, if, like I said, if you have a physical job, I know asking a lot. Um, but if you like, not every day, but if just maybe every weekend, 10-15 minutes to do something you like, if it's, oh, you have a family so you can't, bring them along. For me, it's if I don't have energy that week and I don't have energy to go by myself thrifting, then my family will come with me and we'll go to lunch and we'll have fun with it. So it doesn't have to be like all at once, like this is a business, like I have to like be so structured. You can, have fun with it at first. And if it's not bringing you joy, then when you're trying to have fun with it, then it's not going to bring you joy
When you start, like you said, get the momentum going, and yeah, then you're going to be like, never mind. So yeah, it needs to bring you joy for sure. That's the passion. That's what
hmm
that is. And I love what you said about how you bring your family. It's really cute when you bring the boys
yeah.
thrifting. It's cute, but you know what? I love that advice though, Lily, because it is about how do you integrate it into your life? Because
hmm
when you're going to follow your passion and just go for it, it is going to be a part of your entire life.
Yeah.
So how do you begin to integrate that in? And yeah, I mean, you and I both know what it's like to have physically demanding jobs. We both
hmm
come from retail. We both come from, those backgrounds. I come from an event space, which is, very intense as well. And Lily grew up working the trade shows with me. She worked them with me, fun fact. So, um, but you loved fashion even back then. So not
hmm
surprised you're doing what you're doing. So that's another tip as we kind of close out. What did you love when you were young? We talked about that before, but
We talked about that. Yeah.
yeah, just a fresh reminder there. Don't forget, what did you love when you were young? So
hmm
I think that's really the component here, and kind of the takeaway here too is, the, identify your passion or passions, identify challenges, and marry this all together. And then you can identify your niche. But that's really all that is your target audience. Who are you selling
Yeah.
to? Who are you talking to? And that is like that plus that plus that, three equals business.
Yeah.
That's my opinion on this.
There
And
you go.
that's what I hope everyone kind of takes away from this. But
Yeah.
anything else you want to add in your opinion on this, Lo?
No, I think we summed it up,
I think
in
so
my
too.
opinion.
In your opinion, yeah,
Yeah.
I think so too. So thanks for sharing your insights too, because you have
Yeah.
totally different insights than I do, being a mom and having to marry a lot of that together. And I think
hmm
that's really important. So find your passion, identify a problem, and that will lead you to your audience, which is really your niche. But
Yeah.
also don't close people out. I loved that advice too. How
Yeah.
you're like,
hmm
so yeah. All right. Well, we would love to hear from you guys, so feel free to reach out and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining,
All
Lo.
right. All right. See you next time.
Thank you so much for listening to the My Opinion podcast. Make sure to follow us on all major social media platforms at My Opinion Podcast. And don't forget to follow Lily at Upcycled by Lils on Poshmark, TikTok, and Instagram. And don't forget to follow Maya at Maya Roffler on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. We'll see you back here next time.